where would that maybe fit within the intensity level, intensity
Okay.
effect?
So with the intensity, that's going to depend on how much effort and resources we put into it.
Hmm.
So I would not label the situation of racial slurs high intensity. I
Okay.
would say that this is a problem that we need to explore, or this is a situation that has occurred. Um, because the effect is that lack of change or desire to change, or the
Okay.
change that's put into place so that um, so that it's a consequence of the action or the cause that you put in. Because we know ultimately, whose actions are we responsible for? We're responsible for our actions alone. And so, as it relates to the scenario that you bring up with racial slurs, immediately I'm going to want to know, coming in to support and to collaborate, what systems and practices do we currently have in place?
Hmm.
So if you're a school that is a responsive practice school, or you're a school that has SEL, or you're a school that has PBIS, or a combination of all three, how is that intentionally being used? So are we creating lessons, but those lessons are never delivered to the students? Do we have student advisory opportunities? Do we have student voice in some of the systems and practices that we have in place in school? Are we visible as adults in the hallways? Are we intentionally greeting students every morning and every afternoon to build capacity and build community? So, those are the initial things that I would want to look at. And then to get to the more uh, rigorous things, so to speak, how can we use formal conferencing to speak to those students? And when I talk about formal conferencing, I'm talking about restorative practice. How are we being intentional about having those students come together? Because you have a pre-conference, and then you have that formal conferencing where they're able to express kind of where that's coming from. Based on that data, you're able to then say, these are some practices that we now need to put in place. But we know where people belong somewhere, they want to tend to take care of it. And so, how can we get them to want to tend to take care of the environment in school, but also each other, as it relates to racial slurs? So, that would be the thing. So, how do we chunk that so people don't burn out? And
Hmm.
so, the first thing is going to be, what are you currently doing? And how is that aligning? How is that working for us? And if it's not, where can we make some quick changes? So, like, for example, there are some people that may have PBIS where they teach those formal lessons at the beginning of the school year. But we know that students may need uh, another experience for you to explicitly teach them about the PBIS matrix and procedures. So when are you going to do that again? Are you going to do it in January? Are you going to do it based on the data? So how are you going to set those different milestones with the different levels of intensity? Because you want to be able to address racial slurs. And so you want to address the ones that you know of that are immediately participating. But at the
Hmm.
same time, you want to create systems and structures to educate not just the students, but also some of the adults. Some of the adults don't feel comfortable addressing racial slurs, or they've heard racial slurs and they don't know what to do. And so, listening to your scenario, providing professional learning to the adults on how to help support that and address that in a respectful way that can de-escalate a situation. And oftentimes, and even when I've experienced or heard it, and you have a teachable moment with students, oftentimes they refrain and they rethink. I'm not saying that they don't ever say it again; they just don't say it around me.
They
And
won't say it in front of you. Yeah.
yeah, so it's stuff like that where you start to respect where you are, and understanding that school is professional. And you can have fun in a professional setting, but we need to be professional. And so that's how I would approach it. We got to look at those systems and practices and what's going on.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point about the teachers. I've had a couple questions come up. One is, I've had white teachers say, I don't know how to tell a black kid stop using the N word, or nor do I feel comfortable doing it. I've tried and it just didn't go my, it just didn't work out. I've had teachers say, I've heard racial slurs. I just pretend like I don't hear them, because I don't really know what to do in these type of situations. And so I love that you brought up the point that, if you're working with the school, you start off by asking, well, what are you doing currently? Do you have restorative practices, PBIS, or what do you have going on as far as opportunities for students to develop a community as a school? Do you have that? If not, maybe we should start there. And then the other thing is, here's something I see a lot is, buy-in. Okay, so getting buy-in, to me can be stressful, and I've seen folks say stuff like, well, we're not ready yet because not everybody's on board. I've been preaching this for, every day. I'm burning myself out, wearing myself out, but we're not ready yet. We don't have everybody on board. And I always say, you will never have everybody on board. It's just, people don't like change. People don't think there's an issue. People watch a certain news station that tends to uh, sway people's opinions a lot. So these type of things kind of impact the way that we make our decisions. But you're not going to get everybody on board. But to your point, I don't want folks to be stressed out because they feel like they're the only ones doing this work and they feel like it's not happening at the speed that they want it to happen. What type of encouragement, Sabrina, would you give to folks who are maybe dealing with a lot of high intensity, feeling like they're hitting walls and wanting to give up? Do you suggest some sort of mental health type of things, or kind of just being a part of those groups that you had mentioned earlier? Like, what are some of your thoughts there to just kind of keep the momentum?
Well, if I can go back a little bit with the teachers and educators,
Mhm.
I think it's important for leaders and educators in general to make sure that they understand the shared goal, the shared mission and vision of a particular school division, a particular organization, and truly understand what that means and try to, at first glance, see where do I fit in? What would be my role and responsibility in that organization? I think that's key. I think the second piece is as leaders, making sure that we have shared language. How are you communicating this information? We know that people learn differently. So we have to have a variety of ways to engage them. Some people like, show me the data. If you don't show me data, I'm not moving, whether that's
Mhm.
qualitative or quantitative. Others may say, oh, I hear the stories of the students and I'm just empowered to do. So we have all these different appeals and concepts. And so I think it's important for us to really think about what is shared here. And then with that, how do we honor difference? Okay. And when we keep saying different things about people aren't achieving, there is no achievement gap. It's an opportunity gap, it's a mindset gap, it's how we see our students, how we see ourselves. So, like, one of my first advice pieces would be, are you thinking from a deficit lens or are you thinking
Mhm.
from a strength finding or asset based lens? So when the student says the N word, how can you affirm them as the royalty that they are, whatever it is, and that has nothing to do with race, gender, whatever. Every time I see students or educators that I encounter, they are precious to me. How can I help to support? How can I grow as a learner with them? How can we create something beautiful together?
Mhm.
And so I think that's going to be important. How do I see my students? How do I see my colleagues? And then how do I see myself? And so, am I a change agent? Can I contribute to reaching that shared goal and vision, which we know most of that is about students achieving at their full potential, maximizing the resources that are given to them? Those are generally the mission and the visions and those types of things, or core
Mhm.
values. So, if we believe that we truly do great work together, when we truly believe that students are first and they're the center, then we gotta really assess where do I fall in at? Am I going to do what's best for students, or am I going to do what makes me feel comfortable?
Mm.
And so some of my students, they'll tell you to this day, I liked you, but I did not like you having me write those thesis statements. But they thanked me because now they're using it, whether they're in the military, vocational, or college. They're able to write in a clear and concise manner on how to communicate a responsibility or a job description to workers. And so I was talking to one today, and he was sharing with me some updates. And this student I had in 2011, and
Mm.
he was telling me all the new stuff that's going on in his life and how he's growing. So those are the things that we have to look at. We got to really reflect. And we say, oh, we reflect, and sometimes we do those turn to your shoulder partners and professional learning, or we write down brief reflections and gratitude things. But really taking the words that we write or that we say and bringing it to life in our everyday practice. And that takes time. And so that could be part of it. How can I make some shifts in my actions or my daily encounters with individuals? And that could be something that you could at first start very basic. Am I smiling at people today? That could be a low intensity, even though some people would argue and say that that's a high intensity
Hey,
thing.
I'm about to say that's subjective right there.
So, but it doesn't take much to smile,
Yeah.
and then you can work your way up,
Mhm.
and then maybe giving some feedback or joining communities where you can exercise those ideas and grow. And so it's a lot of things we can do, but we also have to personalize it to where we are and then hold ourselves accountable, whether that be personally or collectively. And so that's the beauty of communities like Adjacent, professional learning that's really taking place at high levels in I was about to say K through 12 college settings, but those types of settings, or different groups where you can express yourself and get that feedback. And so we talk about a variety of issues like that. So I appreciate that scenario because it really allowed me to connect it back to the systems and the practices that we do.